Keep us on time. We're going to start with the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board presentation. Leah Solo, introduce yourself for the record. You may begin.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, committee. My name is Leah Solo, and I am the Executive Director of the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board. I've been in this role since the board got its start, so I'm happy to be here today and present just a little bit of information about the board and what we've been doing, which I hope will be helpful for your discussion today. I know you have a lot on your agenda, so I will do my best to talk efficiently. So first of all, the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board, what it is. The Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board was created in law during the 2023 legislative session. Our purpose is to conduct investigations into working conditions in the nursing home industry and adopt rules establishing minimum employment standards reasonable and necessary and appropriate to protect the health and welfare of nursing home workers. Who's on the board? We have 9 members on the board. 3 are commissioners or commissioner designees. Those are from the Department of Labor and Industry, the Department of Human Services, and the Department of Health. We also have 6 members that are appointed by the governor, 3 representing employers or employer organizations, and 3 representing workers or worker organizations. And what we do, we are tasked with an investigation into market conditions. That is what it says in statute. I like to think of it as research through data and public engagement. I will get into a little bit more about what that means, but I just wanted to draw your attention to some specific language in the statute, which I'll reference later. And that is what is highlighted there. Adopt minimum nursing home employment standards that meet or exceed existing industry conditions for a majority of nursing home workers. I refer to this as the majority benchmark, and basically it means that whatever standards we were setting needed to lift at least 50% plus 1 of nursing home workers or meet their current standards. So as for the research that we did, starting with public engagement, as I said, the board started in 2023 and we got right into public forums in the winter of 2024. We did 5 public forums, 3 in person and 2 virtually. Those public forums were in Brooklyn Park, Duluth, and Redwood Falls. We had 224 people who attended those forums, and I'm happy to report that the speakers at those forums were evenly split between workers and employers. That wasn't something we mandated, it just happened, and I like to think it was because we were inviting people in and making them comfortable to speak. We also did 3 questionnaires. We know that not everybody has time to come to a forum, and so we wanted to give people another way to give us their feedback. And so we had one that was geared toward employers, one toward employees, and one toward the general public. Again, we had about 200 people that participated in those. As for the data that we collected and studied, we examined a number of different data sets, and I think the most important one that we landed on was a unique set of data from the Department of Human Services that let us get a really good look at current wage data for nursing home workers. In fact, they were able to put it into a form where it was in a spreadsheet and we could plug in a potential minimum wage and it would tell us what percentage of workers it would help. Then we also, in our data work group, we worked with advocates representing the employers to look at some survey data from the employer side. That was also helpful and led to some good, healthy debate in the work group. And so then that brings us to our deliberations, first in work groups and then as a full board. As you've heard me reference, we did a lot of work in work groups that were evenly represented with employers, employees, and representatives from the state. We were busy. In those first 14 months, we had about 48 work group meetings, so there was a lot of discussion that happened. We also, in our first year plus, had about 25 full board meetings, and 8 of those happened between conducting our research and finalizing our first set of draft standards. And we did land on 2 set of standards that went through expedited rulemaking. And so what is in those standards? I will focus on the wage standards, as I think that's probably most helpful for your conversation today. These were originally passed by the board on May 9th, 2024. And then they entered rulemaking, which included public comment, where we received over 260 public comments and examined those public comments, and then several other stops before the Office of Administrative Hearing looked at it. The final notice of adoption was published on October 28th, and that in 2024. And the earliest that these standards could go into effect is January 1st, 2026, and I'll get into why that is in a moment. So what's in these standards? The minimum wages that the board landed on are in 2 sets. So one that would go into effect January 1st, 2026, and another in January 1st, 2027. There's a general minimum wage that will apply mostly to folks who work in dietary, cooks, housekeeping, laundry, a lot of folks who do a lot of really important work in the nursing homes. Then we have specific wages for occupations, 3 occupations, so certified nursing assistants or CNAs, training medical assistants or TMAs, and licensed practical nurses or LPNs. And the important thing to note about these wages is that they met the majority benchmark. So I'm happy to share with the board, we have a 14-page memo that goes through the different proposals that were present at the end of our deliberations, and that lays out whether or not proposals would have met that majority benchmark, and these ones did. So now I just want to talk about why those standards won't go into effect until at the earliest January 1st, 2026. That is because they are contingent on an appropriation. So our statute directs the board to work with DHS during our research and determine if the minimum wage standards that we land on would exceed what the nursing home rates are forecasted to go to. During our research, we did determine that these do need an appropriation, and the standards need to be contingent on that appropriation before they would go into effect. So that is why now they are here before the legislature, and it is of course up to you all to determine if and how these standards would be funded. I'll just touch on 2 more things before I wrap up my presentation. One is the other set of rules that are actually now in effect as of January 1st, 2025. There are a number of things that were in this set of rules. One was holiday pay of time and a half for workers that work on any of the 11 state holidays. There is also rules in that set of rules about certification of worker organizations to do training for workers about their rights under the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board Act and rules. And finally, there's information on requirements for nursing homes to post information about workers' rights under our rules as well. And then the final thing that I just want to point out is our waiver and variance process. So statute also directs the board to have a waiver and variance process for any nursing homes that feel that they might be at risk of closure or receivership due to our standards. We arrived at unanimous agreement on this process, and it was launched in December 2024. We wanted to make sure that we had that process ready to go in case any nursing homes felt that they were in danger of receivership or closure due to the holiday pay standards. As of, and I'll just update this PowerPoint, as of today, we have received no applications yet under that process, but it's ready to go. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions, and of course, always available to the committee for any needed information.
Thank you, Ms. Solo. Members, questions? Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Ms. Solo. For both of these proposed mandates, did providers affirmatively support any of them? It's my understanding that there, as a part of your board, there are 3 provider representatives, and did for either of these standards, did any of them say, we support this, we want this to be put in place?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Representative, thank you for the question. The certification of worker organizations and the posting requirements had consensus on those rules. The wage requirements received 6 affirmative votes and 3 abstentions. And those abstentions did come from the employer representatives. They wanted it to be known in our notes that they supported wages for their workers, but they had concerns about the funding.
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Solo. And if those 3 provider representatives would have all voted no, what would have happened?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Representative.
Senator.
Senator.
It's okay.
The rules would have still gone into effect. Our bylaws and statute require 5 affirmative votes for something to pass.
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Solo. One other question that I have is on the holiday pay mandate, and I see here that the notice of adoption was published on December 9th of 2024, and then those standards became effective on January 1st, 2025. Would you have been able to move on that timeline without expedited rulemaking, or is expedited rulemaking, was that required to basically go from noticing the adoption to having it be in place in just a matter of weeks?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator. The difference between the expedited rulemaking and more regular rulemaking would not have affected the gap between notice of adoption and rule going into effect. How would I explain it? The time beforehand could have been affected, so it would have taken longer for that final notice to be published, but it still could have very quickly gone into effect.
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Solo. I guess in this case, what got cut out with expedited rulemaking? If you would have had to go through the normal rulemaking process on this, what other steps would the board have to have gone through?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator. So expedited rulemaking is the only rulemaking that I personally have worked with, so I can certainly get some more information for you. But my understanding is that regular rulemaking would take, more of the year timeline to go through the process, year or longer, and there are some more steps.
Senator Rasmusson, any further questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I no more questions, but a couple concerns I just have with this, which is, Ms. Sullivan, I appreciate you talking about trying to collaborate with providers, but I'm just, I guess, concerned that the board doesn't need to, right? And you could have a proposal that, and I think we've seen a couple that they have not affirmatively said that they support, yet have still gone ahead. And then both of these proposals have followed expedited rulemaking, which at least my understanding, I'm not an expert on rulemaking, limits the amount of input that the public can have on that process and how their voices can be heard. And so I appreciate, some of the informal, work groups that I've been meeting. Again, I just have concerns around being able to put in these very large, expensive mandates with the combination of expedited rulemaking and also not needing a single provider to actually end up supporting any of these standards. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rasmusson. Senator Utke.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the information here, and it unfortunately creates more questions than answers. And just one of the things that you kind of ended with when the question was about who all supported this in the end, and did the employers, and I heard that they abstained, but wouldn't it have been important to the board to have their buy-in, because they're the ones that have the most knowledge on running these facilities, and yet they got kind of pushed aside? Can you elaborate on that?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator, thank you for the question. As you know, as I mentioned throughout the presentation, we did our best to follow the statute and ensure that we were engaging the public and creating space for all folks to talk with the board. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Senator Utke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it was because the three provider representatives abstained. They apparently didn't like it, but they didn't vote no. But why wouldn't the board have taken their input as probably the most important input, because they actually run the facilities today. They live it and breathe it every day. And apparently it appears that they just their opinion got pushed aside and they took it.
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator, I think there was, having as not a board member, but staff to the board, I heard throughout, the comments, throughout the public forums, throughout our meetings, a strong desire for there to be more funding for the standards. And I think that the board certainly heard that. I think that the board was clear that our statute doesn't give the board authority to change how Medicaid reimbursement works for nursing homes. That, of course, lies with you all here. And so for us to address that would have been outside of our authority.
Senator Utke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, kind of to follow up on that, you did mention the fact that when you look at everything, the numbers don't add up because it doesn't match the funding. So how did the board come up with these minimum wages when, there appears to be no data that went into calculating them? They just pulled them out of thin air because what the revenue is coming into the nursing homes, and is it enough? They always can use more and probably deserve more. We talk about that a lot, but we can't just pick these numbers out of the thin air until we have something to back them up. Can you kind of enlighten us on what led to these proposed minimum wages?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator, thank you for the question. As I mentioned, we worked with with several different data sets. And the one that we found most helpful was a set that, that we received from DHS. From there, we were able to look at current wages of workers and plug in potential minimum wages and see which ones would raise what percentage of workers. As I had mentioned, we have that language in statute that says that we needed to have our standards raise or meet current standards for 50% plus one, so a majority of workers needed to be seeing a raise or at least see those minimum wages at their current wage. So that is the process that we went through to find those wages. And then, as I said, we worked with DHS on the amount that it would cost in the way that it is written in 181.213 subdivision 2. That directs DHS as to how they needed to cost out the wages.
Senator Aki, follow up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The statute that you keep referring to, did that come from the bill or the bill language, or did a lot of this come through the rulemaking from the department?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator, thank you for the question. That is in statute. It's in 181.213 subdivision 1, I believe.
Senator,
The majority benchmark is.
my apologies. Senator Aki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question about this process so far and what you're hearing. I know that I get tons of comments, whether it's emails, et cetera, from providers telling me how bad this is going to be on their operation. What are you hearing on your end at the board? Are you getting that same input? Or could you just tell us what kind of input you're receiving or response?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator, thank you for the question. Mostly the questions that we have received so far have been about implementation. So just asking for clarification about how the rules are to be applied in certain situations. And we've done our best to put up frequently asked questions and some presentations for folks to be able to understand how they can implement the rules.
Senator Aki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll pause for now.
Thank you, Senator Aki. I have Senator Gruenhagen, and then I have Senator Abeler, and I just want to note that according to the timesheet I was given, we're 7 minutes over time. Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Director Solo, I lost 2 nursing homes in my district in the last few years. Arlington last year, and a few years before that, Winthrop. And, you know, you remember we gave about $300 million one-time funding to the nursing homes, kind of as a Band-Aid. They wanted a lot more to provide base load. I've met with some of my nursing homes during the off session. They're just barely hanging on. Then the other day I got the governor's budget for 26-27 on all my nursing homes in the district. You know, I mean, they're looking at just a couple of them here. One is in Glencoe is looking at a $3.2 million decrease in his budget. In Hutchinson, it's another 2.8, almost $2.9 million increase over the next 4 years. I'm not going to have any nursing homes left. So I don't know what they're going to do with the most vulnerable that we have in there. And I could contrast with things we shouldn't be spending money on, like the $750 million Taj Mahal across the street over here, but that's another story. But, you know, is there any consideration? Now, I don't know if, I'm praying these cuts don't go through, but we are $6 billion in the hole, okay? So we are going to have to address that. And there'll probably be some reductions. I don't know if they can take any reductions, to tell you the truth, without some of them going underwater. I mean, they're right up to here. Some of them are right here already that I met with during the off session. So, you know, you did talk about an exception form to this. How does that process work again? If I can, I mean, where do they go? How can I inform them if they have questions about that?
Ms. Solo, to the waiver and variance process.
Chair and Senator, thank you. Yes, I'm happy to report we have on our Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board webpage, there's a big red button at the top that says waivers and variances, and they can go there and find the application for a waiver and variance. We have a process set up so that they would be able to get a response within 45 days because obviously we do not want to see any nursing homes go under due to our standards.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks for that response. I guess I would, you know, would it take a majority of the vote of the board to change things again?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator, yes, a majority of the board would vote for anything different, yeah.
Yeah. and
Senator
just
Gruenhagen.
My last comment here. Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think you need to sit back and see what happens with this budget here, okay, before we go forward with this. And I think hopefully, you know, yourself as director and the board will have some open-mindedness to work with these nursing homes that are treating our most vulnerable in our state. And again, there'll probably be some reductions, which is going to hurt them even more than where they're at right now. Again, the $300 million was one-time funding, and once it's gone, it's gone. So please, for the sake of our most vulnerable in our nursing homes, I don't want to see any more nursing homes go closed. I went and visited those nursing homes before they did, and a lot of those people, that was their community, right around their community. And what I know in Arlington, when I asked the manager, well, did you find places for this? I think it was 23 or 24 residents that they had in the nursing home. I said, did you find locations for them? He said, I hope so. That was his response. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think not that what you're doing isn't well-intended, but I think it has to be balanced with the financial need, and especially with the situation we're in at the state level here, and you got to be open to reassessing that.
Thank you, Senator. Yep, thanks, Senator Gruenhagen. Senator Abeler.
Well, thanks, and hello, Ms. Solo, welcome back. Just have it's a good discussion, I think, and I can see some benefits to having a board, and we've, you know, and I was kind of reassured that the things you all vote on have to be funded. I'm not sure if you're aware that DHS said that the holiday pay thing, that the nursing homes could afford it. Do you know offhand what the full price of that was for the holiday pay, like the cost?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator, thank you. Offhand, I don't. We have information up on our webpage in our meeting materials for April 29th and April 24th and May 9th of 2024 that go through the spreadsheets on that information. Excuse me. I think that the statute directs the board to look at whether the holiday pay would have caused the rates to rise higher than what they were already forecasted to raise, and so that is why it was calculated that it did not need an appropriation.
Senator Abeler.
Well, that's actually, I didn't know that part exactly, but so I just was talking to a friend in the audience, and they're connected to 13 places, and the impact on those 13 places was $650,000. I don't know over what period of time. And so I thought that the math came from DHS on whether that's valid or not, but so did you decide that it was covered fine, or did they tell you it was covered fine?
Ms. Solo.
Chair, Senator, that came from collaboration with DHS, yes.
All right.
Senator
Madam
Abeler.
Chair. And so I'm kind of reassured on the bill coming up that that has to be paid for in order for it to go forward with the minimum wage, which any way we can hold more workers is a good idea, but we do have to pay for it. But I guess I'm just going to wave back at my friends back in the corner there, and I'm not sure if the advice they gave you was valid about how this holiday pay thing is going to be innocuous to the places. And I know that there's no desire on your part to make anything be worse, but I just want to tell you that in the opinion of other people, that wasn't trivial. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. Members, any final comments before we move on to our first bill? Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want, for the committee, I just want to remind us that we never had a hearing in this committee on the Workforce Standards Board. Not one. Not one. Probably one of the more consequential policies that impacts a big portion of this committee's budget area, and never once did we have a hearing on this Labor Workforce Standards Board. It showed up in the labor bill, did not come to this committee, and I think that that's something that we need to take a look at, because if we're going to have the Department of Labor and Industry effectively setting some of the most consequential policies for this committee going forward, I think we have to understand, and then they're going to ask us to try to pay for it. I think we just need to rebalance that. And I don't know a whole lot of other committee jurisdictions where you'd have another agency setting the primary rules and regulations on labor standards without more input on that. So I just wanted to make that comment for committee members to remind ourselves of. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Thank you, Ms. Solo. We are going to move to our bills for the day. We have Senate File 2480, Senator Pappas. And you have testifiers with you. If Teresa Breeze and Matt Jensen want to come to the table to join you so they can begin their testimony as soon as you're done.
Madam Chair, I saw I'm online.
I apologize, Senator Pappas.
Yeah.
We can have all the testifiers, I suppose, for and against, come to the table then. And Senator Pappas, introduce your bill and begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few opening comments, and we can turn it over to the testifiers. So as you know, the bill funds the minimum wage standard proposed by the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board according to the requirements of the law governing these rules. According to the process required by the LBO to determine the cost of the rule to the state budget, we estimate that the cost would be about $5.6 million under current law and $15 million under the governor's proposed 2% cap on growth in the VBR reimbursement rate. And we have a fiscal note, which should be have been distributed to you. Leah Solo, the executive director of the board, explained the board's process and the content of the minimum wage rule in detail, so I'm not going to go over that again. But to reiterate, the rule sets an industry-wide minimum wage of $19 an hour in 2026 and $20.50 an hour in 2027 for all nursing home workers. There are higher minimum wages for certified nursing assistants, trained medication aides, and licensed practical nurses. The full rule is in your packet. I think there's broad bipartisan agreement that we want better pay and wages for nursing home workers. That requires legislative funding, but that is not enough. We need a major investment in nursing home rates with the VBR system, and the rates have gone up 100% for 10 years of the program. But according to industry representatives, wages over a similar period have only gone up 70%. So we created the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board to ensure that more of the money we invest in nursing homes would actually go to the workers. I realize employers feel this funding formula does not account for their full costs, and it's certainly open to the legislature to add additional funding. But remember that nursing homes increase pay and benefits for their workers all the time. They have to be competitive to get the workers. And they do that without getting additional money outside of the regular VBR system. With the extra funding in this bill, the industry can meet the standard. So I ask you to support nursing home workers and to consider this bill as part of your budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Teresa Breeze, you may introduce yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Teresa Breeze, and I do laundry at a nursing home in Roseville. I'm a member of FCIU Healthcare Minnesota in Iowa. Our union represents 50,000 healthcare workers around the state in hospital, clinics, nursing homes, and self-directed home care. I am here to speak in support of Senate File 2480, which would fund the additional cost for the minimum wage rule for the Nursing Home Standards Board. I have worked in long-term care for over 25 years and have seen the damage short staffing causes. I testified in favor of this board in 2023. I shared the story of the time that year I worked 23 straight days because we were so short-staffed. Eventually, I tore my bicep tendon and was barely able to lift my arm. I've struggled with this injury ever since. I saw the low pay and lack of benefits and how that caused so many people to leave despite wanting to do this work. When the legislature gives our industry more money, it helps, but it is not the whole solution. Workers need a voice. Nursing home workers just aren't treated with the respect we deserve. I was part of the largest nursing home strike in Minnesota history last March because so many of us were fed up. We were tired of watching so much money go to the homes and yet workers struggled to get by. That is bad for taxpayers, bad for us workers, and bad for our residents. The new minimum wage rule shows workers we can help make things better. I was excited the board spent so much time listening to people across the state. I joined dozens of other nursing home workers at the board hearing in Brooklyn Park to ask for better standards. I am glad they decided to set a minimum wage and to offer time and a half pay as first steps. It's amazing how many people have already got paid holidays on Martin Luther King and President's Day who previously didn't get anything extra. And the wage increases are going to be incredibly helpful. Already more of my coworkers are staying in the industry because we expect better things to come. In my eyes, as a nursing home worker, this board is doing amazing to address the staffing crisis we all know is a problem for Minnesotans. I've told people I actually think more jobs should have boards like this. I'm sure employers don't like not having total power anymore, but clearly their way wasn't working. I ask you to vote yes on this bill and would encourage you to find ways we can all work together to raise standards for all nursing home workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Jensen?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Matt Jensen. I am the former president of AFSCME Local 1851, and I am the maintenance lead at Nielsen Place in Bemidji. I have been in my position for 10 years, and in that time, I have seen my colleagues at our nursing home facilities struggle with burnout, causing low staffing and high turnover. We need the wage increases set by the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board, as nursing homes should receive an appropriate reimbursement for rates to cover costs. That is why I'm speaking in support of SF 2480. What is unique about the name nursing home? Home is in the title. These places are homes for people. People like you and me, people like our closest loved ones, people who may be in the most vulnerable points of their life, at a point where they require care from others. People are why we come to work every day. We are not in the business of selling a product. We are in the business of caring for others in their time of need. Every position in a nursing home is demanding both physically and mentally. Most days, we wear many different hats and perform other duties as assigned. In fact, right now, I have stepped outside of my position and I'm filling in a supervisory role. The work here is rewarding. However, we are challenged with recruitment and retention issues. There is no hiding that there is a nursing shortage. This is especially true in greater rural Minnesota, with aging population that increasingly needs more care. I cannot stress enough how important it is to properly staff these facilities. Low wages have been the barrier to recruiting staff. Quoting our local Vice President, Jillian Grissom, the unfortunate truth is that we cannot afford the services that we provide. Current staff are left rushing, trying to cover being shorthanded. Our loved ones in these facilities deserve better. That is why I'm thankful that the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board has set an industry-wide minimum wage that would increase the pay of many nursing home workers, and I'm glad that SF 2480 would help fund these increases. I ask that you support SF 2480. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members, before we have Ms. Huppert and Mr. Byrne testify, I do want to note for the record that we did hear the Minnesota Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board Act Bill, Senate File 1621 in that biennium on March 6th, and it was amended by Senator Abeler, and then we referred it to the State and Local Gov Committee without recommendation. So we did hear that bill. There was a lot that happened that biennium, so maybe it just passed us over. Ms. Hubbard, Mr. Byrne, feel free to introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kyle Berndt. I am here today on behalf of the long-term care imperative in opposition to Senate File 2480. As background, as we heard earlier, this board was created in 2023. As part of that creation, the statute provided specific cost analysis, which the imperative has raised concerns about. We believe that the cost analysis significantly underrepresents the costs of the mandates to nursing facilities and ignores other costs to other industries who compete for the same trained workforce. The most recent estimate from the imperative is that the mandates from the board will cost nursing facilities across the state approximately $200 million, significantly more than the $15 million estimate that was in the governor's budget and the $6 million that I see here in the fiscal note. We are deeply concerned that without funding, these mandates may lead to further limitation of access to care of nursing care across Minnesota. Senate File 2480 raises a question before the legislature. If the analysis is supposed to be, if the analysis can be zeroed out, the calculation, and the guardrails that the legislature provided in the underlying law can be overruled and codified into statute, why do we have a board at all? With that, I will turn it over to my colleague to finish our testimony.
Ms. Huppert, you may introduce yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Erin Hubert, and I'm here on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative as well. And I will start with what I believe is a goal that we share with Senator Pappas. We want nursing home workers to earn family-sustaining wages. That has been our #1 priority for years. Respectfully, however, Senate File 2480 is not the right tool to achieve that goal. As my colleague stated, DHS has determined that the cost of the minimum wage mandate will require additional spending in the 28-29 biennium of approximately $15 million. While we disagree with the methodology used, it would still set a dangerous precedent to the body to codify this rule in statute while ignoring that calculation. And I think I would offer this as a reflection. We have a lot of providers here today for their advocacy day at the Capitol. To providers, Senate File 2480 sends a message that not only will your right to make your voice heard through the board and its rulemaking process be maligned as being anti-worker, that the financial concerns that you bring forward to the board will be dismissed as hyperbole, or as we heard in the House on a related bill, it will be implied as fraud. But you will be punished for speaking out and forced to implement a mandate that you cannot afford. As you will hear from testifiers later today, the governor's Medicaid cuts would cause irreparable harm to Minnesota nursing homes, the people who rely on them for care, and the people who work in those buildings. We believe the investment should be made through Senate File 1725, which is on your agenda later, and we thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Ms. Hubert. Members, questions? Are you doing? Can I ask? Yeah. I do have a really quick question. I think you said something about a survey, Ms. Hubert, of members or on the cost of this that you had done, Mr. Brandt.
Yeah.
Is there data anywhere on what percentage of nursing homes in Minnesota are owned by private equity?
We have some information. We can follow up with you on it. As to private equity, not specifically, but we have information on nonprofit owned, for-profit owned, and cities or municipality owned. So we can certainly share that. I don't know to the private equity question specifically.
Ms. Hubert?
Yeah, we can certainly follow up. I will say, as a general rule, the vast majority of nursing facilities in the state of Minnesota are either not-for-profit or government-owned. There are a very small number that would be owned by a for-profit entity.
Thank you, Ms. Hubert. Senator Abeler? Oh. Great. Senator Abeler.
Thank you, and so I'm a little frustrated, and so we're told just by Ms. Solo that everything has to be paid for except for the holiday pay, which is fine, which I don't believe is fine. As these people tell me, they're not fine, and they're pretty good at math. And I met some of your financial wizards, to the two of you. They're amazing. They do math at large amounts, and I'm frustrated that the fiscal note that is shown for the cost of this bill is deemed to be inadequate by people who actually have to implement it, even though I don't believe anybody's against the minimum wage. So not now, but there has to be some way where the people who are smart, Mr. Greenman and whatever that crew is there that do math, can sit down with your math people and agree on a number. I don't care what the number is, I do here, but it should be the right number, and so that the well-intended people at the Nursing Home Standard Board, the workers, and you all, as you're there, you could actually agree to more things that if you know they're going to get paid for correctly. So, Madam Chair, I support the minimum wage idea. It comforts me that it's paid for. It discomforts me that, God bless the department, but their math, Mr. Gaiman, could you come talk to us sometime about math? He's not here, which is why I'm asking him for that. But there has to be an agreement. We can't have two opinions on what something costs. Thank you.
Senator Pappas, did you have a response or a comment?
I did, Madam Chair, members, Elise Bailey from DHS is here in the room with you, and she'd be able to kind of address the fiscal note.
Madam Chair, that's not necessary for my sake. Now, we've discussed it before. I just wanted to raise the point again. So, Senator Pappas,
Senator,
I don't need an answer to that question because I already kind of know it. But I just want to make sure that we pay for what you want, and I want to help you pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. And I will say that, you know, when we're in committee, the fiscal note is what we go with. Senator, do you have questions or amendments, Senator Aki? Or amendments? Would you like to, you go ahead. Thank you, Senator Aki. Yep. Senator Aki, you go ahead, and then we'll go to Senator Rasmusson's amendments.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll jump in with, just because of what's been said here up to this point, but, you know, and we just got done with the discussion on math, and this fiscal note says 0, but when these extra costs come in, they're going to come back through the VBR system. That doesn't make the costs go away. It's just going to add up. But, you know, and like I think every one of us around the table, we all support the employees. They do wonderful work, and we want to see them succeed and make as much as they can. But the process is so flawed. It's just it's reckless and inappropriate to do business this way. We raise the expenses before we debate and figure out how we're going to take care of the revenue or to cover these costs. This thing is just upside down. I think we've got to have a more serious discussion on how we're going to make this work, because the employers that I have received information from and talked to, this just absolutely doesn't work. And they want to take care of their employees, but all of their revenue is regulated by the state and the federal government. So we've got a say in what they've got coming to them. And so we need to have that discussion first before we burden them with this. But that's what I've got at this point, Madam Chair. We'll pass it on to Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Senator Aki. And Senator Rasmussen, I'm going to come to you for your amendments, but I just want to say one thing. I think I'm feeling very punchy today, but I'm going to say this. Thank you. I sit on the Education Policy and Finance Committee, and I sit on this committee. I did not sit on the school board. There's just this theme where we have people who work in nursing homes, and we have childcare providers, and we have teachers, and we have bus drivers and school lunch people, and it's just like the people who do the most intimate work caring for the most vulnerable people in our state are the least paid. They're the worst paid people. And our priorities are so upside down and backwards. if we're always having deficit-minded conversations of what we can't pay people who already make so little, who do the most important work. And so I just, like, when we talk about, like, we don't have to be having this conversation. This actually isn't a conversation we have to be having. We can budget differently. We can raise revenue from the people who, the 1% in Minnesota have a third of the wealth. A third of the wealth. Jeff Bezos makes $8 million an hour, and he came to Minnesota asking for tax breaks for his data centers. We can have a different conversation, and so it's really hard when we have nursing homes who I do think they absolutely want to pay their employees, and employees who need to be paid, and we all want to care for seniors. And like the thing that's happening outside of that and around that is that we're just having the backwards conversation from a deficit mindset when we don't have to be. And so that's happened today already in like 3 different bills. So I'm just tying a bow on it. Senator Rasmusson, I will go to you for your comments and for your amendments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move the A1 amendment, and I'm happy to describe it.
Thank you. Senator Rasmusson moves the A1 amendment. Senator Pappas, do you have a copy of the A1 amendment?
I do not, but you could describe it.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. I'll have Senator Rasmusson describe it, and I'll have someone email it to you while we're having that done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Pappas, check your inbox. I asked Senate Counsel to email it to you a little while ago. But the amendment's quite simple. It would simply require that at least one affirmative vote must be cast by a representative of the providers that's on this board. I believe that there are 3 appointees of, I believe, the 9 total voting members on the board. And all it would require for a future mandate to go into place, that you would need one of the providers to say, yes, this is good for nursing home workers, it's good for our industry, it's good for the sustainability of the work that we do to care for Minnesotans. Because one of the concerns that I have is, as well, the board talked about collaboration and valuing that. Ultimately, the policies that they have brought forward did not have an affirmative vote from those representatives. And so I think this is just an important way to encourage collaboration. You don't have to have unanimity, you don't have to have everyone, but you have to have at least have one provider representative say, yes, this is something that we support and want to move forward with.
Senator Rasmussen, thank you for introducing the A1. Members, questions or comments to the A1? Senator Pappas, would you like to react to the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the effort, but it appears that I would have blocked our ability to raise the minimum wage because we saw that the 3 providers abstained from the vote. So I'm afraid I'll have to oppose the amendment and ask the members to oppose it.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Any other questions or comments to the A1? Senator Utke?
Yes, we did hear how the 3 providers abstained, but they did because what was in front of them, the numbers didn't work. They were fiscally responsible at that time. They needed to see where the money was coming from before they spent it. For that reason alone, I would say that I like the A1 amendment and ask for your support.
Thank you, Senator Utke. Senator Rasmussen, any final comments before we take our vote?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I think this is about encouraging collaboration, and it doesn't mean that standards can't come forward like the minimum wage or others. It just means that the board has to work together and at least get one provider on board with moving these mandates forward. So I think it's a common sense amendment that would encourage collaboration going forward. I would ask for member support.
All those in favor of the A1 amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. The amendment is not adopted. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is, once again, our committee can have these conversations. This bill is going to stay in our committee. I thought this was going to get moved someplace else, but this bill is staying in our committee, so we're going to continue having this. So I appreciate what the public is seeing here on these conversations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move the A2 amendment, and I'm happy to describe the amendment.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry. Senator Rasmusson moves the A2 amendment. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The A2 amendment is quite simple. It removes the expedited rulemaking provisions for the Workforce Standards Board and would simply require that newly proposed rules go through the normal rulemaking process. And one of the important elements of that normal rulemaking process is for more opportunity for public input, and in a formal way that gets to go to the administrative law judge and gets to be reviewed up against these statutes. And I think if we're going to put these types of mandates in place, we can go through the normal rulemaking process versus the previous two rules that we saw all went through expedited rulemaking process, which limits the voice of Minnesotans to weigh in on the impacts that this could have. And the reason I want to say this is important is that we have effectively given this board pseudo-legislative authority. They can effectively write new laws that do not need approval from this legislature. New regulations, even effectively appropriating future forecasted spending, which is effectively what they did with the holiday pay rule. They said, we see this forecasted spending in the future. We would like to have that be allocated towards this new benefit that we're going to require going forward. And so I think if they want to do that, we should at least allow Minnesotans the ability to go through the normal rulemaking process and provide their input. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Members, any comments or questions about the A2? Senator Pappas, would you like to respond to the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I respectfully oppose the amendment. This would make it really impossible for the board to complete the process of deliberating, finalizing a rule, and getting it funded in one budget cycle, one legislative session. So I don't think it's practical. I just want to remind members that the rule can't go into effect unless the legislature funds it. And we do have a legitimate fiscal note with the amount of funding in the out years that's in front of the committee. And if the legislature and under the leadership of this committee decides that that's not how you want to spend the money that you have, then it can't go into effect.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. All right. Any final comments before we move to the A2? All right. All those in favor of the A2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. The A2 is not adopted. Members, any other discussion to Senate File 2480? Senator Abeler.
Well, thank you. I don't know if you noticed, I sat out those votes. Not for lack of respect of either side, but I think there could be some improvements made. And I want to caution I have great affinity for the workers and all that, and that they should be paid fairly. I do think we need to find a way to fix the fiscal notes that show the value, and we should not assume that these companies who are on the ropes can afford multi-millions of dollars just taken out of their petty cash, even though I personally think it's nice to pay people for holidays. And we need to find a way to retain our workers and keep them on a career path, which is why I supported the idea of the board in the beginning. I want to caution the people who like the board the way it is, that should the governorship change, and it's always subject to change, that the next crew could unwind everything that was done. And I think that there's some thoughtful amendments that Senator Rasmusson brought forward. And I would encourage people that are interested in this topic to sit down, the solo representatives of the labor and the providers, to find a way to truly respect these employees in a long-term sense. We are short 50,000 workers. And we cannot have people like the testifier, I don't remember her name, just have to work doubles and just wear themselves out. And I learned today some people are working 2 full-time jobs at 2 different nursing homes. And like, holy cow. And so I just want to mention that. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Abeler. Members, any other comments? All right, Senate File 2480 is laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Pappas. Oh, Senator Pappas, I'm sorry. Would you like to make closing remarks? I apologize.
I just appreciate the hearing. I think we spent enough time. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies, Senator Pappas. It's hard when you're not sitting at the table. Okay, Senator Abeler.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Senator Abeler, to your bill, Senate File 855.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this committee hears a lot of discussions about how much these facilities have and how they're doing. And I think we all can agree that most of them are not doing very well. Maybe there's a handful, but just as a group, nursing homes are just forever on the ropes. This is a bill for a one-time add-on for a year, costs about $100 million. 2 years ago, we did $300 million, which is why some of them are still open. It's amazing what difference $12 can make. And so we don't need to spend very much time on it. I do have 2 testifiers, and I'll offer some closing comments and stand for questions. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. Ms. Hubert, introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Once again, for the record, my name is Erin Hubert, and I am here on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative. And we do appreciate the opportunity to testify today in support of Senate File 855. The legislative funding that provided one-time funding in 2023 was unbelievably critically valuable to nursing homes across the state. And we may never know how many you saved from closure following that end of session deal that brought $300 million in one-time funds. But I do remember the extraordinary relief of our members following the unanimous passage of that bill. My colleague will go through a little bit of data on how those funds were used during that period of time. I will say we asked our provider members this year about their financial forecast, their financial position, and the reality is 42% of nursing homes anticipate a negative financial performance in 2025, in part because they found that one-time money so valuable and how they were able to stabilize their operations. And I will turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you. Mr. Burnt, you may introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, my name is Kyle Burnt. I am here today on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor in support of Senate File 855. As Erin had mentioned, the Long-Term Care Imperative surveyed our members in 2024 about the use of the 1235 rate add-on. While providers could select more than one response, we have 2 that we wanted to share. 59% addressed operating deficits with those funds, and 50% said those funds were used to increase employee wages, even though they would have a 6-month unfunded gap on top of the 21-month delay. Those facilities likely had reserves or an ability to cash flow that gap. While we knew at the time that those funds were one-time with no guarantee of an extension, I asked the committee to support Senate File 855. The data is clear that investing in nursing homes is good for seniors and good for jobs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Burnt. Members, any questions? Senator Abeler, closing thoughts.
No, I appreciate it. And actually, it's ironic you say closing thoughts. Without this money, some of them might. And so this is not a Band-Aid, Madam Chair. It's simply oxygen. As these folks, these companies are just, as a group, categorically, it's not like some of the other, like some of the housing providers that are robbers. These are people that are committed to serve. The administrators work ridiculous hours. They take shifts. They can't find enough people. We're short 50,000 people, you recall. And, you know, and with all respect to the person occupying the office across the street, they decided that there's plenty of money and they can take it away, and I think none of us agree to that. We've struggled with fiscal notes and what costs they can absorb. At least this would help the companies absorb the cost they're not really going to incur. That's supposed to be somewhat ironic. So do we have money? I don't know, Madam Chair, and to members, but I think just to call attention to the topic again. And I want to remind you that during COVID and times following, that many of these companies spent their reserves down for the very purpose of supporting their employees. So there's no one in this room who wants to see employees be treated badly. They just want to stay open to serve the people that we need to serve and keep their employees on a long-term basis. So, Madam Chair, thank you for the kind attention to this. And this is the committee, Madam Chair, I think has the most experience and the most opportunity to take leadership on this. And I thank the committee for its time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. With that, Senate File 855 is laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. Senator Hoffman, Senate File 1725. And if your first few testifiers, Toby Pearson, Laura Solonic, want to make their way down to the table as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, I know we're looking at it. It's like, once again, we're going to spend, I love spending 4 or 5 hours with you folks. This is like my, you know, this brings joy in.
Is that a threat, Mr. Chair? No, just kidding. Go ahead.
All right, Madam Chair. Senate File 1725. This is the important updates to the nursing facility payment system known as value-based reimbursement. No, Senator Rasmusson, we are not repealing the value-based reimbursement and going to 245D. Kidding, Toby. But what this does is it adds that annual update to our elderly waiver methodology, that whole conversation. You know, this VBR was enacted 10 years ago. It was in the other body, it was Joe Schumacher, and over here, I thought for you, it was Tony Laurie. And it was a way to pay for the cost of care, incentivize wage growth for direct care workers, and support the cost of food and resident services to that incentivize the quality. It was not designed to absorb a pandemic, nor it was designed to absorb the staffing mandates like those that we've been always talking about, right? And many of us have heard, and now we find ourselves in a position where the nursing homes submit their cost report and receive a rate 1 to 2 years later. It would be great for constituent using money from a 2023 paycheck to pay for 2025's eggs in a grocery store. And the egg cost has gone up. By the way, they didn't go down. I just want to make that known there, Senator Utke. We would all have to make adjustments to our budget in this scenario, but for many nursing homes, those adjustments impact access to care or wages. In 2023, we made significant investments in elderly waiver. It was the highest in the history, I believe, in Minnesota, and that's many low-income Minnesotans accessing senior care like assisted living. Unfortunately, we were not able to include any direction to the department on updating the rates or wage benchmarks, and so which will undervalue the cost of labor and such. That's in there. It's a strong contrast to what we just saw when we looked at the proposed budget. This committee has heard there's the cost, there's a $200 million cost there. We don't have to reimburse providers for expenses like labor, food. That's what it's saying, proposing that we don't have. However, what we need to do is to be able to propose to keep the EWO rates and move those in the direction that we want. It's the conversation we've been having. Senator Utke and I asked the question, can we shrink the VBR? And the answer is yes, it's going to cost. But let's just keep this conversation going. The specifics about this bill. Toby Pearson, Laura Salonik, Brady Johnsrud, and Carrie Thurlow are here. I will get them going. So, Toby.
Thank you. Toby Pearson, introduce yourself for the record. You may begin your testimony.
Madam Chair, members, my name is Toby Pearson, President and CEO of Care Providers of Minnesota. Today, testifying on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative. We're here to express our strong support for the Chair's proposal, Senate File 1725. Has three main things that the Senator outlined, so I will skip through that. This proposal represents a stark contrast to the governor's budget. It prioritizes our seniors, their caregivers, and the sustainability of senior care in every part of Minnesota. The governor's budget proposal represents a regressive shift that decimates how Minnesota funds nursing facilities, reverting to a pre-2016 model that proved inadequate. As an example, prior to the implementation of value-based reimbursement in 2016, caregiver wages had increased by only 12.5% over 9 years. Those were the years we'd come to the legislature and say, please give us X percent of increase, and the legislature would turn around and say, nope, we're going to give you Y, and it's usually a lot less or nothing. Since VBR's enactment, caregiver wages have risen nearly 70%, and we have an increased amount of health care coverage amongst all our workers. This has provided much-needed financial stability to our workforce. Now is not the time to return to a system that did not deliver for our seniors and their caregivers. We take immense pride in the investments our members have been able to make in our caregivers. But the math in the governor's budget is deeply concerning. The combination of significant funding cuts and unfunded mandates from the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board place many nursing facilities in an unsustainable financial position. The first mandate requires 11 holiday pays, as you have already discussed. That's approximately $25,000 each annually and totals about $20 million. The second mandate established a minimum wage of nursing home caregivers. That will cost Minnesota nursing homes approximately $175 million during 26 and 27, 28, 29 bienniums. The Walz administration budget proposal does not cover any of these costs and makes it even more difficult for care providers to absorb them. The combination of these measures will cause irreparable harm to rural nursing homes across the state and will decrease access for seniors who need the care. While we strongly support providing raises for hardworking caregivers, doing so through an unfunded Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board mandate is not the solution. Instead, Senate File 1725 ensures the necessary analysis and funding is in place upfront, a step that should have been taken before, but we are requesting that it be taken now. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pearson. Laura Solonic, introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Laura Solonic. I've been the administrator at Good Samaritan in Howard Lake for 16 years. Good Samaritan has been a nonprofit provider of long-term care services for over 100 years. Our organization serves Minnesota seniors across the state, from International Falls to Albert Lee and numerous cities in between. My location in Wright County provides long-term skilled nursing home care, short-term rehabilitation and therapy, outpatient therapy, respite care, and home-delivered meals to the community. We also offer assisted living services in Howard Lake, and the nursing home has 32 beds and 65 staff members, and the assisted living has 18 apartments and 22 staff members. I am here today to provide my support of Senate File 1725, which would fund the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board's mandates and provide an annual update to the elderly waiver rates. I am disappointed to see that the governor's current budget proposal includes $700 million in budget cuts to nursing homes and fails to fully fund the actual costs of the Nursing Home Workforce Board's mandates to the tune of $200 million across the state. That totals a $900 million funding gap across Minnesota's nursing homes, as you've been hearing. The 4-year estimate for my small rural building in Howard Lake is a funding decrease of $872,220. To say that number is a large financial strain is an understatement. It terrifies me. 1 in 4 Minnesotans will be 65 or older by 2030, and they have a 70% chance of needing long-term care. Baby boomers are already turning 80 years old. 33% of rural nursing home beds have disappeared in the last 20 years. At a time when the Minnesota senior population is rapidly growing and the nursing home beds are already decreasing, adding unfunded mandates and balancing the budget on the backs of the elderly does not preserve services. It will reduce access to care for Minnesota seniors. We have a woman in our building, in our nursing home, whose husband lives in the community, and they just celebrated their 58th wedding anniversary last week. Every day he makes lunch at his house, and he drives it over to the nursing home, and he brings it to her, and they eat lunch together. It's beautiful. If this $900 million funding gap goes through, and nursing homes like mine may have to close, that daily lunch together as husband and wife is no more. How far should Minnesotans have to drive to visit a loved one in a nursing home? I urge this committee to reject harmful cuts and instead support a sustainable path forward. By passing Senate File 1725, you will reinforce your commitment to caregivers, to seniors, and to the future of long-term care in Minnesota. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to testify in support of this important legislation.
Thank you, Ms. Solonic. Next is Brady Johnsrud.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to testify today in support of Senate File 1725. My name is Brady Johnsrud. I am the administrator at Nelson Care Center by Vivi. Nelson Care Center is located in Alexandria, Minnesota. We are a nonprofit senior care provider offering skilled nursing and transitional care, and we serve over 330 seniors each year. Our dedicated team of 115 caregivers, nurses, and support staff work tirelessly to provide exceptional, meaningful care to seniors in our community. We strongly support the goal of raising caregiver wages. However, legislators must recognize that nursing home reimbursement rates are determined by the state. Mandating increased wages without the necessary appropriations creates an unsustainable financial burden, especially providers serving rural communities like ours. At Nelson Care Center, we project that the wage and holiday pay mandates for the Minnesota Nursing Home Workforce Standards Boards will cost over $600,000 over the next 2 years. This represents a substantial increase in payroll expenses, funds we simply do not have at our current reimbursement rates. Additionally, wage compression, where experienced staff rightfully expect compensation reflective of their tenure, further intensifies the financial challenge. Nearly 90% of nursing homes statewide predict worsening financial conditions due to these unfunded mandates. Rural communities, including ours, face particularly severe impacts. Without sufficient funding, providers risk bed closures and limited admissions. Just last week, a fellow administrator from our neighboring community shared that their facility will not survive a single year under these new mandates without support from the state. Furthermore, the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board mandates extend beyond nursing homes, significantly impacting assisted livings and home care providers. To remain equitable across our continuum of care, we'll have to match these wage increases, creating a ripple effect that escalates costs and ultimately increases the financial burden on seniors and their families. This could limit access to essential care services well beyond the doors of our nursing home. Your past legislative support has greatly enhanced the quality and sustainability of care at Nelson Care Center. Continued action and investments are vital to ensure ongoing, stable funding for long-term care. We respectfully urge you to support Senate File 1725, safeguarding the future of senior care, protecting the seniors we serve, and supporting dedicated caregivers in our communities. Thank you again, Chair and committee members, for your consideration and support.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnsrud. And Ms. Thurlow, introduce yourself for the committee. You may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Carrie Thurlow. I'm the president and CEO of Leading Age Minnesota here on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative. And I would be remiss if I didn't start by first thanking Senator Hoffman for bringing forward this important legislation. It's clear that you have a lot of providers in the room today who care deeply about Minnesota seniors, as well as the caregivers that they employ to take care of those seniors. And I think the intent of this legislation, Senate File 1725, is really to chart a path forward as we plan for the future of Minnesota. So it goes without saying that I'm here today in support of Senate File 1725. As you've heard, the legislation provides essential funding to cover the true costs of the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board mandates, as well as ensuring that the elderly waiver program receives an appropriate annual rate increase to meet the rising costs of those services as well. And maybe to start with a little bit of good news. After a period of significant disruption, the senior care workforce has begun to stabilize. I testified before this committee 4 years ago.
He was chair.
When Senator Abeler was chair, that's correct. At that time, we had an all-time high number of open positions at 23,000 open positions in senior care across the sector. Our most recent data, which we collected in January, indicate that the number has decreased to 12,500 vacancies. Never before did I think I would be up here celebrating that we only have 12,500 vacancies, but it is progress. The progress is due in part to some of the key policy decisions that this body has made, including supporting value-based reimbursement for nursing homes, the 2023 elderly waiver investment, and the temporary nursing home rate add-on that you heard about earlier in this hearing. Put simply, investing in senior care is good for access for Minnesota seniors, and it is good for the jobs in our sector. Incidentally, the inverse is also true. To underinvest, or worse yet, to cut funding for services like what is proposed in the governor's budget is both bad for seniors and workers. So this legislation proposes a different approach. While the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board was intended to address working conditions, it instead creates and proposes a serious financial strain on providers and ignores the potential devastating impact of those unfunded mandates with the governor's proposed cuts at the same time. Moreover, those mandates extend beyond nursing homes, which is something we haven't talked about yet. Assisted living providers who compete in the exact same labor market are also closely monitoring those mandates. As you've heard today, a minimum wage mandate for nursing home inevitably impacts all care settings in this sector. Assisted living providers we found that assisted living providers, that 70% of them would also need to raise wages, which is why it is also important to have the elderly waiver conversation this year. That while we did make a significant investment in that program, long overdue investment, and I thank members of this body for doing it, it did not establish a regular rate mechanism to increase elderly waiver. So unless it is also addressed, we are also creating some unfunded mandates on the home and community-based service side. The long-term care imperative has found that 89% of nursing facilities predict deteriorating financial performance due to the unfunded mandates of the board. If implemented without proper funding, these mandates will inevitably lead to closures and reduce access to care for Minnesota seniors that they are entitled to. That same survey also highlights that simply relying on reserves for these nursing homes, which seems to be something that is implied by some of the opposition letters, this is not an option for over half of Minnesota senior care providers that have spent down their reserves entirely or never had reserves to begin with. If the legislature chooses not to invest in these critical areas, or if they lack a budget target to do so, I strongly urge you to consider repealing the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board to restore policymaking and budget authority to this body. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thurlow. Members, questions or comments? Senator Utke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with what we've just heard and the numbers that have been shared, for those of us that have been around the table here for more than a handful of years, we all remember 2022 when someone down near the end of the table there brought forth the idea of a large bill, but in that bill was $820 million to save our nursing homes. You know, since that point, it didn't happen in 22, but in 23, we got some money appropriated, and we've been able to put some Band-Aids in place. But what we're hearing is, if this was allowed to go through as proposed from the governor's office, we'd be right back to 2022, but only worse, because now they have spent their reserves. They're on a shoestring. We lost a lot of homes back in those days. We've lost some since. It would be absolutely horrible, but that's what's being proposed, is to go back in that predicament, which would be just horrible. I don't even know how, you can't explain it. It would be so bad. So we got to find a way to make this, one, hold off those cuts. I mean, that's just can't even be the conversation, but it's what can we do to even improve on what we've got there so that we can help them out.
Spot on, Madam Chair.
Senator Hoffman.
Spot on, and that's why, Senator Utke, I mean, this is what this committee is always, we always focus on what's the matter at hand, right? I mean, we know, and you raised 2022, who that person was, is sitting, he got 26 years ago, he was having these conversations, right? I mean, this is just like this ongoing thing. Here's what, and you and I talked about this, it was like, and Madam Chair and members, we make up 25.7% of the budget, when you look at the big budget, right? Just the human services bucket, 25.7%. And we understand we're good this next 2 years, we're good. I mean, we have a surplus, but all the people are saying we're going to have this deficit, 4 years from now, whatever, kind of like the naysayers, of which then we're going to make up $2.3 or $2.4 billion. In order to make up that, they're going to take $1.5 billion from human services, which is 65%, Senator Gruenhagen. So that to me has never been fair and equitable. And to that point, Senator Utke, who brought it up of elderly waiver? Carrie did. We finally, after 10 years of you know, what was the reimbursement rate on elderly waiver services for the longest time? It was $11.42 an hour. It's laughable. To Senator May Quaid's point, the people that we put that, you know, the grassroots, the folks that are doing the day in and day out work, we're not paying them what they need to pay. Only in this committee can we have a conversation about finding new revenue. I know in Senator Utke, when I say that, he's starting to grinch over there, but that's okay. We're still going to have that conversation here because it's not personal, unlike some other committee that decided to make, for the first time in history, human services a political thing. Not okay. Glenn's places that are going to close. We know the one in Arlington, right? That's in front of us. That's what's driving us to do what we're doing. So I appreciate this conversation, Senator May Quaid, Madam Chair, and members. And so with that, I think we want to lay this one over so we can continue the conversation.
Yes, Senator Hoffman, I think there might be another comment from the committee. It's going to be fast. I just know it because we have to move on. Senator Abeler.
Well, thanks. I didn't mean to step on the closing statement there. So just wanted to echo everything Senator Hoffman said, and so just offer him a compliment. I just want to point out one thing, though, the word naysayer. Actually, Noah was predicting rain, so I'm just telling you it might be raining pretty soon. So I guess I'll be Noah. Hey, we better worry about that. So in the same context, I think Senator Hoffman, I know you play the drums. Hopefully you'll perform magic and find a way to get a decent budget and get this to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. Okay, and with that, Senate File 1725 is laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. And Senator Hoffman, your Senate File 2630.
2030, thank you. You know what? It's the Governor's Council on Age-Friendly. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, team. About the Age-Friendly Minnesota Council. That's, again, it started how many years ago? A certain senator on that side of the place was setting up all these different councils and commissions. And no, but we knew this because 12 years ago, we knew we were going to face a demographic shift. And for the first time ever, our 65-plus population is larger than the number of students in our K-12 education system. Should I say that again? Madam Chair, who serves on education, the good senator from Glencoe who spent 28,000 years on the Glencoe School Board. It's the first time ever our 65-plus population is larger than the number of students in K-12 education. 1 in 5 Minnesotans is over age 65. 1 in 5, 20%. We're going to be at 25% in 3 years. So this rapid growth brings the challenges. The Age-Friendly Council is unique. It includes representatives from the different state agencies, not just those directly focused on aging, but those that have to do what they want to do with it. Isn't that right?
That's right.
And I think online we got Sherry.
She's right next to me.
No, my God, you're sitting next to me. Sherry's right next to me. I'm looking up. I'm looking at you going, Sherry, what are you doing sitting next to me?
Transportation Plus.
Talk to me. There you go. There you go.
All right.
And then Adam Sumala. So, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Ms. Pugh, introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin your testimony.
Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Sherry Pugh, and I am the chair of Age-Friendly Minnesota. And my esteemed author here took my statement about how many seniors or aging people there are in Minnesota. But I want to ask you all, look out into the audience and count 4 people. And can you count 4 people in any cluster in this audience where there isn't someone who's possibly over 55? That makes it real to you, just how many there are. Age-Friendly was established by the governor's executive order in 2019. We were assigned 6 community members from the community statewide and 8 commissioners from different state agencies to form this work and to move forward the idea that Minnesota would become an age-friendly state. At that time, there were only 10 in the country. We were the 11th one to be submitting for that designation. We took our work seriously, and we began first making recommendations to the governor about things that we could do to make age-friendly. What is age-friendly? Age-friendly is about, in this state, we've been talking for years about live well at home, right? That's been our motto. We know that it works. And people are doing it, and we're saving money, even though you've been talking about spending a lot of money before us. But age-friendly really allows the community to catch up with that homeowner. If I'm living in my home well, but my community hasn't also addressed being age-friendly to me and my ability to walk down the street and not stumble over blocks and concrete, to be able to cross the street with adequate time for crossing with the lights, to have parking, to have parks where I can go with my grandchild and I can be with my walker or wheelchair and they can be with their little running feet. So those are the elements of age-friendly that we're seeking. During our short lifetime, we've had an interesting thing. Our first meeting was February 1920, and then we went into shelter with the pandemic. And so my committee has never really met in person in 4 years, but we've been doing hard work. In the first year, we did a survey statewide of seniors. We retained answers from over 1,000 seniors statewide, getting their ideas about their needs and ideas and visions for what aging in Minnesota would be. The second year, we held 7 simultaneous regional meetings of groups, about 100 in each convening, talking about issues and laying the format for what we now call our blueprint for aging in Minnesota. And then most recently, in 2024, we held 4 one-day sessions where people came from all over the state. We had about 100 people a day, and they refined some of those visions, issues, and practices that were recommended from the regional meetings to form what became our draft. And now we're moving into a stage of action teams, which are taking those ideas and practices and looking at how to put them together in policy. Throughout all of this, we've done a grant program where we've done over 88 grants statewide in cities as small as 200 to the metropolitan area. The majority of our grants were in greater Minnesota, and we allowed communities to tell us what they needed to do to make their community age-friendly. And those things were really wild and wonderful. Some of them were things like just making the city hall accessible, putting in ramps and elevators, pickleball courts, which seems sort of, pickleball court, but you know that that's part of staying young. But we also had interesting developments like fire departments starting to talk about the fact that the majority of their business was answering calls for falls. And this has become a big issue. And then their work combined with the work of another grantee that we have, which helps people make adaptations to their homes so that they can prevent falls within their homes. So we're beginning to see the opportunities for collaboration in aging well in Minnesota. We are now at a point where we really need to be sustained as a continuing effort in the state. We bring a lot of innovation and practice and just good know-how of basic Minnesotans on how we can become and sustain ourselves as an age-friendly state. And so I'm going to turn it over to Adam. Where is he?
He would be to your left.
He's over there now. So we're all shifting.
I shifted on you, you're shifting on me, we're good.
Adam, to talk about the blueprint that we're working on, which is really the exciting work of the future of age-friendly.
Thank you, Ms. Pugh. Mr. Sumala, if you could briefly give your testimony and maybe add anything that Ms. Pugh didn't cover.
Sure. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Adam Sumala. I serve as Executive Director of the Minnesota Leadership Council on Aging. I'm here to save you time of 34 delegates of the major organizations in the aging sector that, although they come to our table with a diversity of experience and expertise, they all collectively say the thing that we want to make sure to impress upon you today is that we must continue the work of the Age-Friendly Minnesota Council. I'm thrilled to be up here with Sherry Pugh. I want to make sure that she has more opportunity to advance the good work that is happening. Elevating aging across state government. You hear these conversations every year around how we're not looking with a longer lens. The multi-sector blueprint on aging was one of the major accomplishments that just launched this last December from the Age-Friendly Council. We need to be able to move that work forward. As Sherry mentioned, the blueprint identifies for us really a 10-year roadmap for what needs to happen in the aging sector in Minnesota. And I know you have a lot of decisions to make. Our organization is proud to support over a dozen policy solutions this year. But the work of the Age-Friendly Minnesota Council is truly critical. Without legislative action, this council will stop its work on June 30th of 2027. Please don't make our sector step back to the short-term thinking and piecemeal 2 to 4 year lens on aging policy in our state. We're at the table. We want to make this a standing commitment to our shared future. This work benefits all of our communities. It is not nice to do, it is essential to do, and it's a strategic investment in the well-being and prosperity of our whole state. I want to thank Senator Hoffman, Senator Abeler for signing on for this bipartisan bill. This represents all of us. We are all aging, and if you have any questions, we're happy to take those.
Thank you, Mr. Sumala. Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for Mr. Sumala. It's my understanding that the governor's budget does not include continued funding for this council. I just want to make sure that that's correct. So so the governor's proposing to end the age-friendly council in his budget?
Mr. Sumala.
Madam Chair, Senator, this was not included in the governor's budget, but it was an initial governor's recommendation. I think it's important to note that the council over the last 5 years has proven its value.
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sumala. And I guess as my follow-up question, did you get any information or from the governor's office as to why they didn't include this in their budget proposal, why they're basically saying that the work shouldn't continue?
Mr. Sumala.
Madam Chair, Senator, I would invite a conversation with the governor's office at any point. No, we have not.
Senator Rasmusson. Okay. Thank you so much. Senator Hoffman, any closing thoughts?
Madam Chair and members, this is really important. I mean, just imagine Sherry Pugh, Mound, Minnesota, 35 years. The list, you can see her biography. But, in 2016, if she would have beat Senator Osmick, she would be sitting here on the table with us. So it's nice having you here. And the work you do, Sherry Pugh, I just want to say thank you. This is something worth. I told Sherry and the team, quit being so friendly. It's time to get angry. Age angry now. That's what we want. So we don't have to. There was a call for it to go to another committee, but since that committee wanted to make, well, I'm not going to say anything bad about it. We got that waived, Madam Chair. It's staying here, and we're going to lay it over.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Hoffman. And I believe that the council is funded until 2027. So this would just codify the language into statute, which I think is great. Okay.
Good.
This is Senate File 2630 is laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. Senator Rasmusson to Senate File 2537.
Good to see you again, Sherry. It's like looking up at the Zoom.
Senator Rasmusson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have an author's amendment, and so if it's appropriate, I would like to move the A1 as an author's amendment.
Thank you. Senator Rasmusson moves the A1 amendment. This is an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oops. All those opposed? The amendment is adopted. Now you gavel. Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate how you handled that amendment. Members, the bill before you clarifies that licensed practical nurses, or LPNs, can do tasks consistent with the Nurse Practice Act in assisted living settings, and that what they're already allowed to do in clinics, home care, and hospitals, they can now do in assisted livings. This does not lower a standard of care, nor does it change the current scope of practice to anything that's new. It's about allowing skilled nurses to do the tasks that they're licensed to do under the Nurse Practices Act. The proponents of this bill received technical assistance from the Minnesota Board on Aging to ensure that this language was consistent with the LPN scope of practice and the Nurse Practices Act. We've also received feedback and incorporated with the A1 from the Minnesota Department of Health, which is the licensor for assisted living. And so I just want to emphasize that every point of feedback from the Board of Nursing and the Minnesota Department of Health is now incorporated in this bill with the A1 amendment. For me, Madam Chair and members, this bill is about pragmatism. Minnesota is short about 5,600 RNs according to DEED, and allowing LPNs to work at the top of their scope in assisted living facilities helps provide quality care to Minnesotans that are living in assisted living facilities. So with that, happy to turn it over to my testifiers.
Thank you so much, Senator Rasmusson. Nicole Mattson, you introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nicole Mattson with Care Providers of Minnesota, and here today on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative. As stated previously in this committee, and even today, the long-term care sector is facing persistent workforce challenges. We have over 12,500 job vacancies, and more than 2,500 of them are in the very critical nurse category. So the 5,600 that Senator Rasmusson referenced, I guess half of those nurses are needed in long-term care. Now more than ever, the contribution of every single team member is vitally important. And to that end, Senate File 2537 would allow licensed practical nurses to conduct focused assessments consistent with their scope of practice under Chapter 148.171. LPNs are trained, licensed health professionals who have the ability to conduct these assessments. This is part of their professional scope. It's what they're trained to do. In this context, a focused assessment is completing a comparison of data to normal findings and the individual's current health status. They would have the previous assessment to reference. LPNs could conduct these assessments prior to AL licensure, and LPNs conduct these assessments, as Senator Rasmusson said, in every other healthcare and home care setting. Changes in condition are still required to be reported to the RN per scope of practice, and an RN would be required to conduct the initial assessment and perform any assessment upon a change of condition. Furthermore, restoring the credentials of the LPN to the top of their license may re-energize career pathways for caregivers aspiring to the nursing profession. The LPN role has historically been a stepping stone to achieve an RN license and more. This change is needed so LPNs can continue to have a role in our settings. We want to leverage their skills and expertise to benefit our residents and ensure they can work to the top of their scope. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rachel Babcock, who I believe is on Zoom. You can come on camera, come off mute, introduce yourself for the record, and begin your testimony.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Rachel Babcock, and I'm the Assistant Director of Nursing at Willows Landing in Monticello, Minnesota. I'm here to testify in support of Senate File 2537, a bill that would restore our licensed practical nurses' ability to work to the top of our license in assisted living settings, just like we could do in every other healthcare and home care setting. LPNs, I believe, are a vital part of our team. We're trained licensed healthcare professionals. Senate File 2537 is important because it allows our full team to work to the top of their ability. This is not about lowering any standard of care for our residents, nor is it about minimizing the role of the RN. Instead, it is about empowering our LPNs to use their nursing skills to the same degree they can use in a clinic, a hospital, or in home care. I know personally that through nursing school, we have head-to-toe assessments drilled into us throughout our entire program, from skin assessments to mobility assessments, respiratory assessments, and everything in between. We have many LPNs throughout my organization, and they are some of the most skilled and valued caregivers we have. We do not understand why we can no longer do focused assessments when many of us were doing them prior to licensure or in other healthcare settings. Many assisted living communities struggle to find RNs when hospitals and clinics offer better wages. While that isn't our challenge here, I'm very sympathetic to my peers. We must allow LPNs to do the work as it helps our RNs focus on their scope and responsibilities. Allowing LPNs to do these focused assessments also ensures crucial evaluations are done on time, ensuring residents' health is closely monitored and their care plans are up to date. LPNs being able to perform comprehensive assessments would be better positioned to identify early signs of changes in residents' conditions, which could lead to quicker interventions and may prevent hospitalizations and enhance overall health and well-being. I thank you, Senator Rasmusson, for introducing this bill, and I thank the committee for supporting the bill today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Babcock. And then last testifier we have is Nancy Haugen, who I also believe is on Zoom. You can come off mute, come on camera, introduce yourself for the record. You may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Human Services Committee. I appreciate this opportunity to express concerns about Senate File 2537. I understand there is an amendment. I am not clear as to the intervals of assessment that are in the amendment, and I am also not clear about how nursing delegation fits in with the intent. However, I will speak to you today as an RN public health nurse, licensed in Minnesota since 1969, also having more than 20 years experience as a nursing preceptor for baccalaureate students as they develop nursing assessment skills and expertise. As a family member, I experienced varying quality in nursing assessments for my mother, who lived in assisted living memory care communities for 5 years. As president of Elder Voice Advocates, I speak on behalf of best practice nursing care, or at least for our consideration today, safe minimum standards for nursing assessment. If enacted as proposed, I am concerned that Senate File 2537 will endanger vulnerable elders who rely on nursing care in assisted living communities, especially those individuals living with the consequences of dementia who are often unable to describe their needs. Many individuals receiving nursing care in AL or ALFDC communities have complicated, co-occurring health conditions. Recognizing this, 140G/44G currently requires a registered nurse to complete initial and periodic comprehensive assessments. And for persons with dementia, the statute states that care planning must be done in a manner that sustains the resident's abilities. Sustaining abilities requires frequent assessment for subtle changes that, if not addressed, can mushroom into difficult to treat situations, as well as increasing and possibly irreversible disability. One example would be the person who becomes chronically dehydrated, then develops a urinary tract infection, but by the time symptoms are noted, increasing confusion may have been labeled as out-of-character behavior instead of as a sign of a UTI, or more critically, the person may be developing potentially life-threatening sepsis. Senate File 2537 references focused assessment and comprehensive assessment. What is the difference and why does it matter? Licensed practical nurses receive instruction on conducting focus assessments in an 18 to 24 month program at a community or technical college. Focus nursing assessments are usually targeted to a single body part or system, noting differences from normal findings in an individual's typical health status and reporting those findings to a registered nurse. These are critically important assessments. We do not disagree with that. According to the Minnesota Board of Nursing, a comprehensive assessment falls within the scope and practice of the registered nurse and consists of the collection, analysis, and synthesis of the data to establish a plan of care and address changes in a person's condition. An RN receives this education in a 2-year associate or 4-year baccalaureate degree nursing program. There are differences in an LPN-focused assessment and a comprehensive assessment, even in a specific situation. An LPN-focused assessment might note a person's blood sugar level as being outside the expected range as determined by the primary healthcare provider. The RN comprehensive assessment would include how that out-of-range blood sugar level may be affecting the person's vision, alertness, mobility, emotional ability, emerging neuropathic pain, or signs of skin breakdown, as well as other risk factors including for falls or serious metabolic consequences. In best practice nursing care, any RN or LPN typically incorporates into everyday encounters a nursing assessment. But each time the RN engages with a person, The RN synthesizes connections between multiple observations: breathing alertness, skin integrity, mobility, pain, the ability to hear and see and respond verbally or non-verbally. This informs a nursing judgment about the health status of the individual and triggers the nurse to initiate any appropriate further assessment, interventions, or care coordination to prevent increasing disability or hospitalization. Findings from an LPN-focused assessment can be part of this comprehensive assessment. But think about the many possible dangers to an individual's condition if, as providers imply in Senate File 2537, a comprehensive assessment conducted by an RN is only considered necessary once every 6 months,
Ms. Haugen?
alternating. Yes.
Can I ask that you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yes. Since implementation of 144G, the workforce challenges have been mentioned by providers. However, there is no indication that any provider has requested MDH to issue a waiver from this requirement. It raises the question of whether this proposal is driven by more financial interests in permitting the use of less costly but less skilled nursing personnel to conduct assessments. Madam Chair and members of the committee, I urge you to maintain minimum standards with regard to the frequency of comprehensive nursing assessments by registered nurses in assisted living. Thank you for your attention and concern.
Thank you, Ms. Haugen. Members, we are laying this over, but are there any questions? Okay, Senator Abeler, a quick comment.
Just really briefly, and just to comment on the bill, particularly on the use of staff. Just so people know, and with all respect to the elder voices that are concerned about this, I have some concerns as well, but there aren't enough human beings to do the work we need. There aren't enough nurses to go around, there aren't enough anybody's to go around, and so how do we find a way to use these other staff that are extremely talented and in many cases have 20 and 30 years of experience to do this work? So we'll keep talking about it, but I just wanted to know that we acknowledge the concerns, but we have to actually take care of our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. Senator Wickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in years past, I have been concerned about some of the language that's been brought forward, and this seems similar to it. And so I still do have concerns that it will weaken care opportunities for people or seniors living in these settings. And I think your amendment, I was trying to figure out how it's changing from the original bill, but it looks like what your amendment does is that basically an LPN could conduct sections of the comprehensive reassessment for all of those opportunities under letter C. And so I guess my concern would be that, well, for one thing, it states sections of the comprehensive reassessment and doesn't give what those sections are. And then I guess just the overall, if this is true for any comprehensive reassessment that they could perform sections, I think it really needs to have a lot more definition about what is it that you're seeing that they could provide in those sections of the comprehensive assessment for those cases under letter C. I would have to see a lot more information before I'd be comfortable that wouldn't weaken the care that's being received and the observations that are being received.
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to clarify for committee members and those watching, and also in response to Ms. Haugen's comments. And we also have another person here at the testifier table who had submitted a letter of opposition as well. So I want to make sure that she gets a chance to talk. But I want to say that it's my understanding that with the A1 amendment, it addresses the concerns that were raised, whether it goes, we're keeping the comprehensive assessment is done by a registered nurse, has to be done at least every 90 days. And all that we're doing is we're allowing an LPN to complete sections of that comprehensive assessment that must be reviewed by an RN. And so to just make that concrete for what that could look like is an LPN could gather data such as vital signs, height, and weight. They could do a focused skin integrity assessment, documenting any wounds or areas, and then give that information to the RN for the RN to complete their assessment. And so that's why Minnesota Board of Nursing, they're good with this language. They haven't requested any changes. Minnesota Department of Health, that is the licensor for assisted living facilities, they're good with this language. They haven't asked, every change that they've asked for is included with the A1 amendment. And so I just wanted to comment that, some of the concerns that were brought up by Ms. Haugen and others have actually been addressed in the amendment that we adopted.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. And Ms. Rodina, if you would like to introduce yourself for the record and begin your testimony with gusto, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair McQuaid and committee members. I will be very brief. We shared some of the concerns that Senator Wickland and Ms. Haugen have illustrated, but do see the A1 amendment as addressing those concerns. We appreciate that the 4 assessments that currently exist for assisted living residents will continue to be 4 assessments during the year. So our primary concern is addressed, and we appreciate the amendment. Thank you, Senator Rasmussen, for submitting it.
Thank you, Ms. Rodina. All right, Senator Rasmussen, any closing comments? Great. Senate File 2537 is laid over for possible inclusion in omnibus bill. And our last bill, also a Senator Rasmussen bill, Senate File 2628. If I could have Commissioner Clark and County Attorney Magnuson come to the table. Okay. So, no, it's okay. Before we begin, Senator Rasmussen, to your testifiers, I'm not going to ask you to shave off any of your testimony if it's important. So let's have a robust discussion, not bound by a clock, but being aware of the clock. Senator Rasmussen, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to keep this efficient as well. So again, this bill is a starting point for conversations on the work that we need to do collectively on priority admissions for direct care and treatment. This committee has talked about this topic for the last few years, and we know, and I think we all collectively agree, that we need to make progress in this area. Specifically, this bill addresses components of the Priority Admissions Task Force recommendations and is being supported by a coalition of individuals who are really on the ground and need to have this work for the people that they serve, including the Association of Minnesota Counties, the Minnesota Association of County Social Services Association, Minnesota County Attorneys Association, and the Minnesota Sheriff's Association. I'll just briefly go through some of the highlights of what this bill does. First, it ensures that counties are not responsible for the cost of care of individuals that are awaiting transfer to another state-operated program. It also creates a dashboard so that patients awaiting transfer to a medically appropriate bed can see the number of individuals waiting for treatment by program, the longest, the shortest, and the average wait time on that list. We would also continue the 48-hour rule under certain conditions. If capacity is expanded, we would shift the 48-hour rule to 10 days to allow for more flexibility. And this would also allow jails to bill the Department of Direct Care and Treatment, DCT, for the cost of care for individuals that are sitting in jail or correctional institutions awaiting placement in a state-operated treatment program after 30 days. This also will continue the important work of the Priority Admissions Review Panel to evaluate existing mobile crisis programs and funding, evaluate the county correctional facility long-acting injectable pilot program, evaluate existing intensive residential treatment services, and also study local fiscal impacts and provide evaluation support of the limited capacity that we have and the access to state-operated treatment programs. And I would say most importantly, and this is the really important part of this bill, it increases capacity. And we haven't seen proposals that have increased capacity at direct care and treatment. This would increase capacity of forensic mental health beds by 72 beds, a 20% increase. at AMRTC, which is a critical piece in our continuum of care, would increase their capacity by 22 beds, another 20% increase. And then for our community behavioral health hospital beds, we would also increase by 20%, or about 19 beds. And so while there will continue to be discussions and other stakeholders that were part of the task force that will have different thoughts, I was compelled by this group of county leaders coming together to say we need to increase capacity, we need to work to make sure that we don't have individuals with mental illness languishing in our jails. I had a constituent, there was a story in the Star Tribune about this last biennium, that waited more than 100 days in a county jail to get into direct care and treatment. And so we need to address these issues. We need to do the work now this session to make a difference. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to my testifiers.
Thank you, Senator Rasmusson. Commissioner Clark, you may introduce yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Terrell Clark. I'm a county commissioner from Stearns County. I'm here on behalf of the Association of Minnesota Counties of MAXA and MICA. I have served as a member of the Priority Admissions Task Force and the Review Panel, as well as the Competency Restoration Task Force before then. There's a lot of good ideas in all of those white papers that are out there. We support them all. We're here, as Senator Rasmusson said, to start trying to imagine some things that could be different if capacity actually starts getting funded. So this bill, as Senator Rasmusson said, reflects the top priorities of our statewide county associations. Again, we want to focus on capacity and how we can start moving forward to really making sure that people are getting the care they need, when they need it, and where they need it. You'll see that this specifically is looking at a timeline for priority admissions, creates the need for urgency for the state to add necessary DCT capacity, and that changes in the 48-hour rule must only occur with increases in the capacity at DCT and community. Our task force and review panel came together and said, okay, let's extend the sunset for another 2 years and being able to look at the medical needs. What this bill says is let's go ahead and fund some of the capacity, and we can actually change what the waiting period would be. So while that's another possibility, any bill that doesn't actually have you all in the place of funding increased capacity is something that is going to fall short and just further exacerbate our challenges. So the other piece that's in here that I'm going to address, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Magson, if that's okay, Senator Rasmussen, is this bill would also produce long overdue investment, as we said, in the capacity at DCT, highlighting in this bill AMC, MAXA, and MICA's priority to permanently fix the does not meet medical criteria cost of care billing. It's inappropriate to charge county taxpayers when individuals at DCT facilities are awaiting transfer to another state-operated bed. When the delays in transfers are caused by the lack of capacity in the DCT system, counties should not be charged 100% of the cost of the placement. This can be as high as $2,400 a day. The temporary reprieve that you gave county taxpayers in the last 2 years meant about $10 million in savings to those same taxpayers. These charges can bankrupt a county's behavioral health budget and are costs outside of a county's control to manage or avoid. We recognize the challenging budget dynamics this year, but it's past time to make these necessary investments in DCT. And we request respectfully that we are stopped being billed inappropriately for these does not meet medical criteria costs outside of our county's control.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Kevin Magnuson, introduce yourself for the record. You may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senators. My name is Kevin Magnuson. I am the county attorney from Washington County, and I am on the executive committee of the MCAA board, and I'm speaking on behalf of the MCA today. Thank you very much for the opportunity again to talk about this really important issue and this important bill that we've come forward with. Thank you, Senator Rasmusson, for authoring the legislation. Obviously, it's of critical importance to all of the county stakeholders. We wouldn't be here if it weren't. We have also, on the lawyer side, we've gotten more lawyers involved, which I'm sure makes everyone smile. The more lawyers, the better, right? But the public defenders have been very supportive, and the defense bar, the criminal defense bar, the MCAA criminal lawyer section is also being very supportive. It's one of the only times that I've seen where you've got people in every capacity in the justice system, in every role, who support a single concept and really a single methodology, which is truly amazing. And that's for a long time we've been rearranging the deck chairs here. You know, Sheriff Stanek and others pushed for the 48-hour rule to put some sort of deadline to put pressure on DHS to expand capacity. It didn't happen. We got together for this report, which was a really amazing moment in time when all this kind of people started talking for the first time, and this coalition, or at least this convergence of interests, came together. But in 2022, MCAA was pushing a bill in this body that would hold DHS to account for the 48-hour rule, saying that the 48 hours started at the time the commitment order was signed, and now we've had judicial confirmation of that. At the time, DHS was pushing their medically available language to not have the 48-hour rule. And it was fortunate that we met, but the unfortunate part was after we had the agreement and we came to the body, people were looking at us saying, where were you last year? Why are you asking for money this year? Everybody wants, more money, but this is a perfect, project for funding the previous year. And unfortunately, it is unfortunate that our groups hadn't begun talking earlier, and then for so long we had not been working at expanding the capacity. As everyone agrees, the mental health crisis has just exploded, but our capacity in these secure psychiatric hospitals, the only kind of hospital of its type in Minnesota, has been stagnant. So as Commissioner Clark testified, the capacity part of this is the linchpin. It's our whole agreement in the two reports and in our other coalitions that are here. It all comes down to capacity. If there is not a capacity expansion of some sort, and I'll leave it up to you to understand what that means in your world, but it really means something that gets us on the road for real expanded capacity. The whole coalitions and the consensus on this report falls apart. There's none. If you want to move the 48-hour rule, whether you suspend it temporarily while DHS is working on this, or if you want to extend this sunset for a little while, or I shouldn't say monkey, but tinker with the deadline, for these purposes. That's fine, but that's all contingent on there being capacity. Without that, our position is we want a hard deadline, mostly because we need DHS to be communicating to you how they're not able to meet a deadline and that they need the capacity funding. The other piece that I'd really quickly, because I've talked longer than my share, I apologize, that I'd like to draw your attention to that is new. That really helped, Senator.
Continue.
Is the notice, the transparency and accountability provision in at 5.3, also at sections 3 on the admission, all the admission metrics that we can use to see the progress that DHS is making. But the accountability part with the notice is that there should be a notice that goes to the individuals who are sitting in jail, in many situations feeling really hopeless, and their counsel, to tell them where they are in this priority admission process. Are they in the top third, middle third, bottom, whatever. We did in quadrants in ours, in our legislation. But DHS was amenable to the idea that we can tell you where they are generally, just don't make us tell us an exact number, and I think that makes sense. but that notice provides important information for people who feel that nobody sees them. And to go to Senator Rasmusson's point, and I think it was the constituent that you referred to who spoke at a CLE, a continuing legal education that we hosted, where she said, you know, as this was going on and she was trying to get a mother's voice heard, she's saying, who's the wizard behind the veil? Who do I have to talk to? Why can't I talk to anybody to find out what's going on with my son? And that is a real problem for everybody involved, including DCT. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Bill Hutton. Introduce yourself for the committee, and you may begin your testimony with a mind towards the clock. We're not bound by the clock. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Is this working?
We can hear you, yep.
All right, Chair, Senator Rasmusson, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Bill Hutton, and I am here on behalf of the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, representing the 87 elected sheriffs of Minnesota in support of Senate File 2628. I will add that I am a 3-term retired sheriff from Washington County as well. The issue of priority admissions, often referred to as 48-hour rule, is one of the most critical challenges facing sheriffs across Minnesota. The law was initially put into place at the urging of our membership to establish a timeline for individuals suffering from severe mental illness who have been deemed by the court as a danger to themselves and others. These individuals should not be in county jails. They need professional mental health care in appropriate facilities. However, that is not what is happening. Minnesota jails house individuals suffering from mental illness every single day. These individuals are not receiving the treatment they need to return safely to their communities. Some are severely mentally ill and dangerous, yet the courts have ruled through a legal process that they cannot proceed in the criminal justice system and should be under the care of professional mental health providers. From that point forward, we are criminalizing mental illness simply because there is nowhere else for them to go. The 48-hour rule is not being followed, and instead, these individuals remain in county jails for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or even more than a year, despite the law stating that should be transferred within 48 hours of a judge's ruling. This is unacceptable. The Minnesota Sheriff's Association actively participated in the task force on priority admissions. Sheriff Brian Welk of the Cass County Sheriff's Office dedicated significant time and effort to this issue, and I want to be clear, there was no agreement in the task force on a single solution. Time and time again, we hear that legislation reflects an agreement, but no one in that task force was willing to put in writing what the real solution is. Capacity, capacity, capacity. That is why this bill is so important. We are grateful to Senator Rasmusson, Chair Hoffman, and other co-authors for having the courage to say that this is what it takes to solve the problem. The reality is that without the necessary funding, upwards of $115 million in the first year and $70 million in the second, this crisis will continue. We cannot afford to keep kicking the problem down the road. Some will argue that modifying the 48-hour rule to 10 days is a step in the wrong direction. I want to be clear, there was no agreement in the task force to extend the timeline. However, if and only if we increase capacity, then we recognize there may be room to discuss flexibility in the transfer timeline. But let's not lose sight of the bigger issue. Sheriffs do not want to house individuals with severe mental illnesses in jail. This is not safe for them, it is not safe for our staff, and it is not the right thing to do. As the task force report states, the current result is that too many people with mental illness in jails, hospitals, and the community wait sometimes for weeks or months, or in some cases, over a year, for admission to intensive state-operated services or to appropriate treatment service in less restrictive community-based settings. We must do better, and this bill is a necessary first step. On behalf of the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, I urge you to support House File 2628 and make a real investment in a mental health treatment capacity.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. And our last testifier is Dr. Stevens, if you want to come down to the table. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
On the bottom of the microphone, there's a little switch to flip.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kylie Ann Stevens. I'm the Executive Medical Director at Direct Care and Treatment. I'm here today to represent DCT. I want to start by acknowledging this is a difficult issue with no easy solution. That is why you convened the Priority Admissions Task Force and continued the work through the review panel last year. 3 weeks ago, I sat at this table and shared the recommendations of the review panel, which were agreed upon by all members, all 6 recommendations. This bill does not honor or reflect the panel's work. This is not the bill of the panel. I would like to briefly address the most significant aspects of the bill that directly impact direct care and treatment. This bill removes the requirement for a medically appropriate bed to be available before admitting to someone to DCT, and instead requires admission within 48 hours. I would like to remind the committee of the national perspective on this issue. Only 12 states have timelines requiring admission with any period of time at all, Minnesota by far being the shortest timeline. DCT does not have the capacity to admit everyone waiting within 48 hours, which would automatically set us up for failure. You would be writing a law impossible for DCT to follow. We simply cannot go over DCT's current capacity or admit people without documentation, a safe space, or safe staffing, and to do so is irresponsible and negligent. This does not adhere to the medical ethics and in the end will hurt patients, staff, and place us at risk of being shut down by regulators. DCT was previously in this position of non-compliance not terribly long ago, and it took many years and several $1 million to crawl our way out of that place. So we are in good standing with state and federal regulators. We are now held up as an example of best practices in behavioral health care across the country. We don't want to go back. We must not go back for the care of our patients. Most importantly, restricting the time frame does not fix the problem. It only increases the risk. Maintaining the medically appropriate bed language is paramount to maintaining reasonable and safe medical practice. This bill as proposed requires significant commitment from the legislature to increase programs to DCT by 20%, an arbitrary number not reflective of actual need based on waitlist data. Expansion to this degree is incredibly expensive, as you know, and puts everyone needing services at DCT's door. Capacity is an issue, but if we conceptualize the behavioral health continuum as a ruler, there are 12 inches on that ruler. DCT represents that 12th inch, as Marshall Smith, our CEO, says. This bill places everyone on the 12th inch of that ruler, which is simply not a reasonable or sustainable solution. This bill also requires DCT to reimburse anyone holding a civilly committed person waiting in jail beyond 30 days. We do not have the funds to support this without negatively impacting current operations. We would need to cut programs to meet this requirement without additional funding. The notification and reporting requirements in this bill are onerous, and I'd like to say that we are very open to transparency. We've already committed to creating a dashboard and are updating policies as we speak without any legislation of any sort. But the language in this bill is above and beyond what is reasonable and what was recommended by the review panel. And in some cases, I think might be downright harmful to the people waiting if they're constantly getting reminders that they are not next in line for admission. We all want the same thing here, for people who need services to receive them. We share in that, but we must do so responsibly, and we urge you to rely on the recommendations put forth in the priority admissions report. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens. Senator Rasmusson, I think we're going to have a little bit of conversation, but I think the desire is to table this bill and pick it back up on Monday so we can finish the conversation at that point and make recommendations or not. But we'll spend a few minutes. Members, questions or comments? Senator Abeler.
Well, it sounds like if there's no money, this bill is a nothing bill. So, and we're all aware of the challenges to respect all the people at the table. Anyway, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. I will, I'll just mention too, you know, in our packets was a letter, and in particular from NAMI, that Senator Rasmusson and I just, I want to read this because the difficult discussions that the Task Force on Priority Admissions had, they came to a consensus. It happened in the last hour of the last meeting this bill is not that consensus. And so, you know, in it, Ms. Abderholden said, I find it deeply distressing that the county organizations would have come together and have a bill introduced that does not reflect the recommendations of the task force but goes against them. The panel has been recommended to continue in the future, but the broken trust has made it hard to move forward. I mean, it's really hard to, I mean, we're talking about a very difficult topic, right? That is very clear. There's a lot of work trying to be done. But I just want to be mindful that when we put folks together to come up with solutions and they agree on those solutions, and then these kinds of things happen, it's harder to put them back in rooms together to ask them to agree on solutions. And so I just really want to say that gives me tremendous pause about this bill in front of us here. And Senator Hoffman.
Thank you. So it sounds like, I mean, we still got some work to do. It's 5:30. You know, I like what the chair's saying about let's bring this back up on Monday, finish this conversation, dig a little bit more deeper as to the why. I mean, I wanted to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes quizzing Magnuson on the why, but that's okay. Senator Rasmusson, I like this conversation. Let's keep that up. Senator McQuaid, Madam Chair, thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. And so that we will lay Senate File 26. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Rasmussen. I'm ahead of all myself today. Senator Rasmussen, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want, we have, I believe, at least 2 members of that Priority Admissions Task Force here at the table. And so I don't know if Mr. Magnuson wants to just share that perspective, because I did not serve on that. I've read the report like everyone else. I also just want to say I've deep respect for Ms. Abderholden and her work, and I've read her letter as soon as it was sent, and I also appreciate the folks that are here talking about concerns at direct care and treatment. But I also want to state for members that the 48-hour rule comes back into effect July 1. It goes back on July 1 of this year.
Yeah.
So we have to do something.
Yeah.
And I think this bill is a way to start that conversation and to talk about the capacity needs. And we have a lot of stakeholders at the table who understand these important reforms, and myself, and I think anyone at this table is very open to alternatives and things that can be done. But the status quo isn't going to work for the state of Minnesota come July 1. And I think we recognize that. So I'll thank you, Madam Chair, for the time, and would hand it over to Mr. Magnuson to just talk about his experience on the task force.
Mr. Magnuson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In particular, I want to address your comment that this gives you pause and explain a little bit about what's going on here. I think I've emphasized every time that I feel that this was a unique moment in history that this task force was able to accomplish, thanks to Senator Hoffman, who's been heckling me so far today. I'm kidding, but to be quick, I think the last session, and Sue Abderholden knows more about this topic than I'm going to know, in the next 10 years. She knows a lot about the details, particularly about the community-based care that is her interest. But she wrote the draft that we worked from with Representative Adelson, and we had a long process because the draft reflected her view of what was agreed on in that task force. And as a result, the important questions got kicked to this task force because we couldn't deal with it in the last legislative session. So what we've done here is we've focused on areas of consensus, and there are a couple of things that, from our perspective, are things that we'd like to see that were not addressed in the task force. I mean, the task force was not asked to come up with legislation, unfortunately, and so the parties kind of have to do it afterwards. So it generally reflects the consensus of the task force, but it does get some other areas that are important started that aren't directly addressed by the task force. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Magnuson. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Magnuson. That's exactly what, I think Monday's going to be good to get into the why, because now my mind is going to that evening in the Capitol when I introduced you to the, that was, think about that, right?
It was fantastic.
It was fantastic, and it was like, here we go. So I want to get deeper in the weeds on where this is going. Important stuff, Rasmusson, Senator Rasmusson. I absolutely do it. Once again, it's 5:30. Would everybody be willing to come back on Monday, Madam Chair? I guess that's your thing, is to finish this thing, right? Is that correct?
Yes, Senator Hoffman, and I will remind folks that we do have Zoom options available if driving is an issue. Commissioner Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things. The governor's bill is not going to have any capacity increases because his proposal didn't. So that is going to be highly absent of any solutions to move forward. And Dr. Stevens has done incredible work, others have, but without that being there, this actually is what's in Senator Rasmusson's bill is a fraction of the capacity that's needed. So this is significantly less, just to have named it, than what even the task force report puts out there. Again, just look at it as there's a way to look at some other tools since we last met as a task force. The important takeaway, though, is without more capacity, regardless of what time frame you put on, there are going to be people that are going to be languishing in jails or in other places that need treatment. So we're hoping to work together. Sometimes, I've got a 6-year-old granddaughter and 2 almost 3-year-olds, and they've got big emotions. There's a lot of big emotions around this. We just have to go ahead and try to move past some of that to really focus on how to hopefully get you all enough of a target so some capacity be increased, because otherwise we're all going to be back here again next year. And that's not what we want to do. Next Monday sounds pretty great, though.
Thank you. Senator Abeler, quickly.
Just really brief. Well, I just suggest you can plan the time, but maybe you can do a time certain for 3 o'clock so then they can plan to be here. But Senator Rasmusson and the people here, I understand this care. It's hard. Thanks for jumping into this one. I'm glad it's you right now. So thanks.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. And I'm going to turn it over to Senator Hoffman to do some of the logistics. It is still his committee.
No, I think let's do it first. Let's come out right away, finishing this conversation. You gonna be able to get here, Doctor? Just so, and Senator Rasmussen, because the other one that we left that's gonna need a lot of conversation is the good senator from Minneapolis, Senator
Mohammed
Dibble.
Omar Fateh.
Dang it, look at me. It's just like, I never have enough time to have these conversations. This is what this committee is about, so I appreciate that. So Monday, David, if we could put that, the first up, is that okay? Madam Commissioner and Doctor and Dan and Kevin, is that good? Madam Chair, the gavel back to you.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. All right, thank you to our testifiers. We're going to lay Senate File 2628 on the table. And with that, members, our committee is adjourned.